Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. No religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. And with that, welcome to Early Stoppage, a show where the news of the day is usually given just enough time, but sometimes not enough. I'm John Frank, and I'll be joined shortly, as always, by Craig Allen of Fight Night Picks. And between the links on this episode of Early Stoppage, we start with what everyone's starting with these days, COVID-19, the coronavirus. Craig, I'm deep in this game right now, like I'm sure everybody is. However, if you're expecting projections or thoughts on the pandemic itself, you won't get that from me because that seems very irresponsible. I will only tell you to look at the CDC website and stay current with them. We on this show, we're going to talk about how MMA and by extension sports has been affected by this. Craig, the UFC has been, by public standards, relatively slow to respond. NBA and MLB have suspended their seasons. XFL done. March Madness not happening. Just today, Bellator canceled their event. And yet, here we are with the UFC holding an empty arena card in Brazil. Last I checked, making no changes to the UFC London card and moving a couple of cards to the UFC Apex. This thing is full of a lot of layers. First, let's talk politics. Dana White is a very visible supporter of President Trump. President Trump himself has been slow to acknowledge the severity of this and slow to move on it. Let's next talk about risk. Even in arenas or venues that are empty, there are fighters and fighters teams to be concerned with. There are the MMA gyms that are staying open for training. So it comes down to a conversation of the show going on and the fighters being paid versus the health and well-being of everyone who is connected to them. Craig, I said a lot there like I always do at the beginning. What are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I'm not saying this to be like, oh, he's a Canadian, but I honestly don't know what's going on in the States. We have a whole different set of things going on up in Canada right now. I'm just on the CBC website, and actually our Prime Minister's wife is in isolation right now. She has a coronavirus, so he's self-isolating at the same time. He held a news conference today. According to CBC, tighter border restrictions on the way. Cruise ships banned from Canada until July. If you fly to the States or anywhere else in the world from another country to Canada, you're supposed to self-isolate for 14 days. So yeah, there's a lot going on here, and they really they're trying to clamp down on travel. Which, to go along with what you said yesterday, Dana White, of course, on television saying we're going to move the Portland card and the Columbus card to the Apex. We're going to go ahead with the London card, even though the last time I checked, the Premier League just canceled or suspended all their games. UEFA was canceling games. Like, if there's soccer in England and they're canceling games, it doesn't seem like the smartest move to have an event in a giant arena. You look at what's going on in New York. In New York, they tighten restrictions on gatherings of more than 500 people. Yet you have everybody on Twitter saying, what's going to happen with UFC 249? This is bigger than UFC 249. Like, I get it. We've had Tony Habib booked 5 times. Have him fight in a bar for all I care with 6 people in attendance. Let Conor McGregor be one of them pushing his whiskey. But in terms of like the severity of this, I think it's crazy that the UFC is going ahead with events. Like, Bellator decided day of in Connecticut, hey, you know what? Screw it. We're going to postpone it. We'll hold it at another date. I know somebody had mentioned over on Twitter, it was actually Ali Abdelaziz said good on Bellator for paying the show money to all the fighters, which was great to see. I mean, you can't help but applaud that. But I feel bad for everybody that went to Brazil to fight. And, it has to weigh heavy on their minds, even if they are going to fight tomorrow. The fact that this is going down, they're going to have a hard time getting home. I mean, like, pick a fighter like Randa Marcos. She's going to fly from Brazil. There's probably going to be a connecting flight somewhere, and then you're going to fly to Canada, unless there's direct flights from Toronto, and then you have to make your way back to the Windsor area. So I just think of people like that, and it's an incredibly unfortunate set of circumstances. But to expect all of the fighters to make it into the Apex that were supposed to be on the Portland cards or the Columbus cards, it's ridiculous. Like, what happens if, and I know Francis Ngannou said he's going to do it, but what if Francis Ngannou said, nope, you know what, I'm not flying out of France, or I'm not going to fly through the United States. It's too much of a risk for me. It's not worth my health. What would the UFC do there? Couldn't they really do anything? Because we talked about this. You got no fighter union. You don't really have much of representation. You don't really have a good opportunity to make it known how you feel. And if they want, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope, and I think this is one of those times where you really just have to understand that you're going to take a loss, and everyone's safety is of paramount concern. And I think that making the decision to the fighters, I'm a unique situation because I'm a teacher, so there are districts. Even though Arizona hasn't been hit very hard by this, there are districts that are closing. My district is not closing because there's a lot of other logistics that are involved. The thing that I've heard the most is if you close all the schools, all the medical personnel will have to not go to work. So that's a problem because they have to watch their kids. So I understand that. And, with kids being a low risk of this, they're kind of playing the odds. Everybody is. I think this is a weird situation where, there can be, it's a serious enough situation that it's right on the cusp. It's right, you're not exactly sure what to do. If it were a more dangerous virus, which we're just taking out everybody it touched left and right, people would of course be like, all right, let's self-quarantine. And then as it's so unknown that people are like, well, they're every time that they're trying to give the public good news, I feel like these corporations are using that good news as an excuse to then get back to business as usual.
Like, I'll give you an example. So it was Monday or Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday. I saw a picture from Portland, Maine, where they were totally sold out of bottled water. And I thought, that's not true. No way. And then a guy came on site. I was in Moncton. And he goes, yeah, they're sold out of toilet paper at Costco. And I thought, no, like, he's full of it. So then I get back to Fredericton. I go grocery shopping last night. Oh, they were sold out of toilet paper. And there were huge lines when the store closed in half an hour. Then I went out again today. Biggest lines I've ever seen at stores. And you talk about price gouging, like 24 rolls of toilet paper for $35. I'm pretty sure they're not always that price, if I'm not mistaken. So
right.
It's getting weird, but in terms of like fighting, it just, to me, it's weird that the UFC is going ahead with these events.
Yeah, and I don't really know what to make of it. I don't know if it's a political play by Dana White, if it's a money grab. I don't know how to process all of it.
I'll give you one thing on this before we move on. I had a comment from somebody that said on YouTube, awesome that we were able to have the picks. Great that we have the fights this weekend. I'm not a fight fan. I'm an aggressive gambler, and there's no other sports to gamble on other than this and some soccer. So I watched your video, which, I mean, awesome. It's a shame you have a gambling problem, but thanks for tuning in. But still, I don't know if they want to be like, oh, you know what? We're the only game in town. So if we're the only thing that's on ESPN or on the news cycle in terms of sports, we're going to gain out of it. I don't think that's the way to go about it.
Here's the scarier proposition for the UFC is what happens if you find out after the fact that a lot of people that were connected only by these events then contract the coronavirus. And you know what I'm saying? Like you go, okay, here's 10 people that we know in the UFC that have the coronavirus and they were all on UFC Brazil. And I mean, I'm sure as part of the UFC Brazil card, they're going to get tested. I mean, you would imagine. But, the availability of testing is a question at this point. So I don't know. For me, I think that it's just I understand the frustration of Khabib Tony and its place in the world now that, the coronavirus is out there. But I don't think that it's something that should get put in front of safety and the health of the country at large. All right, Craig. So we were putting a show together this week, and honestly, neither one of us was overly motivated to do it because what do you talk about when all this stuff's going on? On the one hand, you don't want it to be where everyone turns it's coronavirus talk and you can't escape it. And also, you don't want to be, and I'll drop my Chael reference here. Listen, Chael did a video about the McMillions documentary. That's how much MMA there isn't to talk about right now. So what we came up with for our 20th show, which is interesting, this is our 20th show, is we decided to do another State of the Divisions pod. We can get caught up where everybody's at in terms of what's going on, what we think, how the division is going to move forward. It's not going to be overly coronavirus linked because it's going to be just talking about the divisions. And we're not really going to get too much into the upcoming cards that might be canceled. All right, so let's get it going with the let's try that one more time. Let's get it going with the lower weight divisions. For the men, I'll give you my take on the division, and then you can amend it however you see fit. All right, let's start flyweight. Craig, the champ at flyweight is Henry Cejudo in the sense that he never lost. So he may be stripped. I don't think he was stripped. He was supposed to be stripped. Had Benavidez won, Benavidez did not win. And then you have Figueiredo, who won and did not make weight. So he's sort of the uncrowned champ. For the fighters who are on the cusp, I put Pantoja, I put Moreno, I put Askarov, I put Kai Kara France. This is the perfect time for me to explain to you what on the cusp means for
Please
me.
do.
On the cusp is anyone who's never fought for the belt. So it doesn't matter what the rankings are. If you have one guy who's kind of near a title shot and hasn't fought for a belt in the division, that's my only on the cusp guy. So there, if you fought for a belt and lost, even if you're next in line for the title, we can discuss you later. But on the cusp is guys who have not yet fought for the title. So again, Pantoja, Moreno, Askarov, and Kai Kara France. In terms of under the radar, I was going to leave that to you because I listed my on the cusp guys. And then best fight to make or best fight that's made. In this one, I had Formiga and Moreno, which is coming up soon, and I think this weekend. And the best storyline of the division is who deserves to fight for the title. So what are your thoughts on all that? What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, especially like the first bit. Champ. Cejudo, he never lost it. Formiga won, but he didn't make weight. So who's your champ? It's up in the air. And then if you look at your best fight to make or be made, you have Formiga and Moreno. And that's where I don't really get it because Formiga hasn't fought for a title yet. He's fought Benavidez and he lost. He fought Cejudo before Cejudo was the champ and lost that fight as well. So for me, my on the cusp, I think you really nailed it. I'd probably put Kai Kara France out of there and I'd have Formiga there just because higher up in the rankings. I think Askarov, where he's still undefeated, he's definitely up there, had the draw against Moreno. And then you know my thoughts about flyweight. I think this is arguably one of the most exciting divisions right now just because of the quality of fights that they put on. You know, a year or two ago, they thought the division was going away. So it's almost like Contender Series. Everybody's going out there to beat the wheels off each other and stay in the promotion. So at this point, you have to think Formiga Moreno, that's your next title challenger. The under-the-radar storyline, I went balls deep on this Monday night on Between the Links. But to me, it's the fight between David Dvorak, who's taking on a tough guy in Bruno Silva. That fight, two guys that are unranked. Silva's moving down from 35 to 25, where he's originally from the Ultimate Fighter Season 4, Brazil. He trains with Team Pitbull, so you got the two brothers plus Henry Cejudo, the double champ or single champ now, double C. You can't call him triple C. And then you look at David Dvorak, and he's finished, 15 to 17 wins. Like, he's an absolute buzzsaw. So that's the fight to me that's under the radar. It's this weekend. Not a lot of people are talking about it. But the biggest storyline is, right, who deserves to fight for the title? I think it's the winner of Formiga Moreno against Figueiredo, but who knows?
Yeah, I'm with that. I say we that's the one that goes. I mean, it's the fight that's coming up. Obviously, listen, for better or worse, it's going to get a lot of eyes this weekend. So there's a chance that, you know, just because of circumstances, that we can really get these guys out there and promote them. I'm with you. I think that's the next fight to make. All right, let's move on to 135 pounds. The champ is Henry Cejudo. I have on the cusp Aljamain Sterling, Petr Yan, Corey Sandhagen. I put Rob Font in there as well. Under the radar, I'll leave to you. Best fight made or to make. Listen, there's a couple of good ones that are booked in this division. Cejudo and Aldo. There are a lot of people that have problems with that fight. It is booked. It is for the belt, so it's relevant. And then Marlon Moraes and Petr Yan. So, and as far as the biggest storyline, I put Sterling versus Yan as far as who's next for the title shot after Aldo. Which guy is going to really emerge as the person that gets the next shot? What do you got at 135?
Yeah, I mean, that one's tough, the biggest storyline, because you have to have Petr Yan beating Marlon Moraes to get a shot at Aljamain Sterling, which is weird to say because Marlon Moraes beat Jose Aldo, and Jose Aldo's getting a title shot. So to me, under the radar, that's it. You have another guy who's lost 2 fights in a row challenging for a title. Is it going to work out like Yoel Romero, Aljamain Sterling, or is it going to be a better fight, and is it going to work out for Jose Aldo? I don't know. That's not an under-the-radar storyline or under-the-radar headline, really, because I mean it's a title fight, but it's something that we're not totally putting 2 and 2 together. The other thing is Corey Sandhagen. Corey Sandhagen being on the cuff is great, but where's Frankie Edgar in all of this? Are they making that fight? Is that fight happening? What's Frankie Edgar going to do at 135? So to me, I think he really fits in an awkward spot, especially these guys from 45 moving down to 35. And I love the fact that you have Rob Font in there because that guy is dynamite in his hands. You've seen what he can do against some of the best in the division, and maybe 2020 is going to be his year.
Let's look at these guys like they were horses in a horse race. If I gave you Aljamain, I know, but hear me out. If I gave you Aljamain Sterling, Corey Sandhagen, Rafael Assunção, and Cody Garbrandt, is there anyone who has sort of an outside shot to sort of sneak into a title shot? Like, for example, if Corey Sandhagen stopped bothering himself with Frankie Edgar and then set his sights on Aljamain Sterling, would that be smart on his part?
I think your dark horse there, if we're using horse talk, is probably a guy who had, kidney problems this week? I thought Garbrandt was the guy, really. Yeah. I mean, we were always waiting and wishing with bated breath that Luke Rockhold could figure out the check left, but now we're just doing the same thing with Cody Garbrandt, who we want to see fight, and it's a shame that Assunção fight fell through, but he's the guy for me.
Yeah, I agree. And before we get out of here, let's not forget about, in terms of 135 pounds, let's not forget about John Dodson. He's had a lot of losses, but I don't know, man. There's something about that kid.
Quick hands.
And our buddy, Sugar Sean, how far is he?
He's pretty far out. I know John Hyun Ko threw it out there that maybe Sean O'Malley should hop in for Cody Garbrandt, fight Rafael Assunção, and everybody hated that on the internet. Every single person hated that and said, no, it's way too quick. But listen, man, a couple of wins in that division. If Jose Aldo and Frankie Edgar can be in the conversation for the top 10 and the top 5, why can't Sean O'Malley?
And I agree with you. And honestly, if he goes after that fight, the worst that can be said was that it was too soon. It's not going to.
What's Rafael Assunção going to do to you? Take you down? Like, he's not going to hurt him.
I don't think he loses a lot by trying to get that fight. I don't know if they'll give it to him, but I don't think he loses a lot.
Wily pillow-fisted vet, knockout artist, and great submission artist. What happens there? I don't know.
There you go. Let's move on to 145 pounds. Featherweight, Alex Volkanovski is the champion. On the cusp, I had Magomed Sharipov, Yared Rodriguez, Calvin Kattar, Shane Burgos. Best fight to make, or that is already made, would be, I think these are both, neither one of these is made. So Korean Zombie and Ortega, that's the conversation we'll have in a second. Zabit and Yair. Biggest storyline, should Alexander the Great and Max run it back, or who's next? What do you got here?
I mean, there's so much going on in featherweight. A lot of people are considering this the best division in MMA. For me, or in the UFC. For me, it's flyweight right now. Very dynamic, but featherweight is great as well. I think on the cusp, it's a guy that's not young, but he just signed a bout agreement against a guy who wanted his release. How about Josh Emmett, Edson Barboza? That's a fun fight. Emmett's not great taking a lot of damage and volume, so that makes it interesting. But if he can outlast you and land that power shot, he can win. So that's a guy that I would watch for. Maybe not totally under the radar. Best fight to make. Korean Zombie Ortega. That has to be biggest storyline. That has to be everything in this situation. Because Brian Ortega, what are you doing? What a donkey.
And we're going to get to that in a second, like I've already twice foreshadowed. So fights that are already kind of booked, or not already kind of booked. Calvin Kattar and Jeremy Stevens. That's going to happen in April. Hanato Moicano and Hadzovic. It's going to happen, March this weekend, right? I think it's this weekend. Yeah, tomorrow night. Ryan Hall and Ricardo Lamas. So there's some stuff out there. So let's get to our sparring sessions now.
All right.
I want to talk about the Brian Ortega situation. And this is a little bit of a deviation, but it is featherweight. It is Brian Ortega. It is Korean Zombie. I want to talk about your thoughts on civilians and who constitutes being a civilian and if civilians are off limits. So obviously Jay Park is a friend or translator or whatever he is with respect to the Korean Zombie. Got smacked by Brian Ortega. At first, Brian Ortega said, I apologize. I slapped 3 people. I only should have slapped 1, meaning that Park holds 3 roles in the Korean Zombie's life, and I smacked the one that I had the most problem with. Unfortunately, the other quote-unquote 2 got smacked, which was kind of crazy. And then he came out with a full apology. So, what constitutes a civilian to you, and are they off limits? Meaning, is a translator a civilian? Is a coach a civilian? Is a family member a civilian?
Anybody who's not a fighter is probably civilian. So to me, Jay Park, off limits. Like, this guy's helping Korean Zombie. He's translating. He's a rapper. He's this, he's that. He's a famous guy. And he's a part of, you could say, his camp, meaning his crew. But, like, you can't attack him, especially if he's defenseless and he doesn't look like the biggest guy in the world. That'd be like a fighter. I had this happen at a fight. Like, I was sitting cage side and a corner didn't agree with the decision. So what does the corner do? They go absolutely bananas and try and barge their way into the cage. And they're like pushing on my chair and they're pushing everybody out of the way and they're freaking out, whatever. Should I be a part of that? I'm just sitting there covering the event. Should Jay Park be a part of that? He's just there covering the event and trying to help translate and being there as a buddy. Do buddies need to get hit?
Well, I don't think buddies need to get hit, but I think that, there's an old saying that when you run your mouth, you risk it getting smacked. And I think that there are limits to that, but then there should also be limits to the level in which you want to engage with a guy like Brian Ortega. Once you start to run your mouth, you now are separating yourself from just a translator into someone who has his own viewpoint, his own beliefs, and is taking his own safety at his own peril. And for me, I'm with you. I understand that if you're a fighter, one of the things that I've always liked about fighters is they are very confident guys. And the reason why they're very confident guys is because they don't have to worry about what's going to happen to them because they can defend themselves. So, one of the things that Joe Rogan said that I like is that he said the reason why he trains martial arts is because he considers himself to be a good guy. And if a good guy's going to meet up with a bad guy, the good guy should decide who gets hurt. And I agree with that. I think that Brian Ortega should have determined who gets hurt in this, and he wasn't a very good guy in this one. So while I don't think that I do think that Jay Park overstepped the bounds by which a civilian should conduct themselves. I do think Brian Ortega should have known better.
Yeah, I mean, in that circumstance, you got to be the better man. And the other thing that I wanted to reference was the fact that, did you go full-blown Irish on one of those words at the start of your paragraph? Because I didn't know that you pronounce fighter as fighter.
Did I say that?
Well. Twice, 2 times.
Well, listen, sometimes I get a little crazy. All right, let's move on to lightweight. This is a division with a lot going on. We'll start at the very top with Khabib Nurmagomedov, the undisputed champion of the world. Although the nature of being an undisputed champion is that no one else can lay claim to the belt. Tony Ferguson has an interim belt of which he never lost. So there is some dispute. The old joke goes, if there was no dispute, why are these guys fighting? So Khabib and Tony will be hooking it up, despite all the concerns of fans. On the cusp, I have a lot. Okay, I have Gaethje, Hooker, Kevin Lee, Makhachev, and Gillespie. The best fight that is made or to make is obviously Khabib Ferguson. Everything begins and ends with that fight in this division. Biggest storyline for me is Conor and Gaethje, and do they fight, and which of them deserves the next shot at Khabib? So if you have any under the radar or any other stuff, what do you got at 155 pounds?
It's tough. You expect storylines out of me for every single one of these divisions, but all right, I'll do my best.
No, just under the radar fighters. Under the radar fighters is fine. Anything you got?
Well, I'm going to say this. So 2 guys that are on the cusp that hopefully we can see play out later on, and it all depends on what happens this weekend. You get Charles Oliveira taking on Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee missed weight, wasn't allowed to continue to try to cut the weight, so he weighed in 158.5. He's going to fight Charles Oliveira, 5-round main event tomorrow in Brasilia. Fingers crossed unless it gets canceled. Now, Kevin Lee's already called out Islam Makhachev, says even if he wins this main event, he wants Islam Makhachev. Islam Makhachev wants him and doesn't want to see women fighting anymore. But Islam Makhachev has a tough test in front of him because he already has a fight booked against Alexander Hernandez, which I think is a winnable fight, but it's a fight nonetheless. So that fight between Makhachev and Kevin Lee is contingent on both of them winning and Kevin Lee not moving up to 170, which I think by now he probably should move up to 170, even though he lost RDA in such a bad fashion. Biggest storyline, love it. Conor McGregor, Justin Gaethje, who deserves a shot at Khabib, make them fight each other, money, performance bonuses, the like. But yeah, this is probably, would you say, between this and maybe welterweight, the most established division where it's just so talent rich that you can't miss it?
100%. And this is why people keep calling for the 165-pound division, because both of them have so much depth. One thing we would be remiss if we didn't bring up is the fact that Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker are already booked. That fight's in May. That's obviously going to be an important fight for division. Diego Ferreira and Drew Dober are going to fight. You talked about Kevin Lee and Charles Oliveira. You talked about Makhachev and Alex Hernandez. So, yeah, there's a lot going on in this division. There's a lot happening, a lot of moving parts.
If I could mention one, maybe like if you want a can't miss prospect that's on his way up, it would have to be Arman Tsarukyan. I mean, the guy coming into the UFC gets a tough test. In his last fight out, he beats Olivier Aubin-Mercier. Thank you. See you later. Enjoy PFL. And now he's going to be taking on Davi Ramos, which is a really good fight because Davi Ramos, wily vet, awesome jiu-jitsu, Arman Zarukian, great forward pressure, really good scrambles. That should be a good fight. But if Arman Zarukian wins that, I would expect maybe not a ranked opponent, but somebody pretty darn close, like maybe like a Scott Holtzman or I don't know, whoever loses between Barboza and Emmett and doesn't get cut, somebody like that.
How much would it surprise you if 2 years from now Drew Dober was top 10 fighter?
Isn't that ridiculous? Isn't that ridiculous? Like, not a stupid question, but the fact that like they just booked Drew Dober in a fight that makes absolutely no sense to me. It just seems silly.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he had that big win, and then he just kind of, yeah. I don't get the booking either. He's been around for so long that you feel like the guy's only 31. So, all right, we'll see. All right, let's move on to welterweight, 170 pounds. Your champ is Kamaru Usman. On the cusp, I had Masvidal. I had Leon Edwards. I had Ponzinibbio. Best fight to make, or that is already made, Woodley versus Edwards and Usman versus Masvidal. The Woodley-Edwards fight has been made. It's one of those fights, you're talking about under the radar. You're hearing nothing about. This thing's a week away. In terms of storyline, honestly, I put Masvidal, Covington, Edwards, Conor. Who's the best challenger for Usman of all those fighters? I mean, that to me is like, what's next for Kamaru Usman?
Under the radar, I'm trying to think because, again, credit where credit's due, and I can't for some reason. It'll come back to me, and if I think of it, tweet at me if you want, DM me if you want. I'll think of it, but there's a series that I watch on YouTube. I really, really wish this would come to me in the spot, but it was a whole 20-minute episode about where's Colby Covington? He went on that huge PR storm where he said he wanted more money. He was trying to fight for better compensation for all the fighters because he didn't want just the regular challenger's purse when he was taking on Kamaru Usman. He was already and there's air quotes here, he was already the interim champ. He deserved more money. UFC wasn't going to give it to him. So he went on this huge tirade, media circus, where he was attacking everybody in the UFC and wanted more money for himself and all the other fighters. And then he lost. Where is he now? I haven't heard anything about him. I heard that, did he really break his jaw? Not so much. And then I saw him boxing, which is cool. But I haven't heard anything out of Colby Covington. Not a peep since November? So to me, the biggest storyline is, where's Colby Covington? Because he said that the offers from WWE weren't even close to the ones from the UFC. And I'm saying they're better from professional wrestling. So we're going to see Colby Covington back in the UFC. That's got to be maybe it's under the radar because nobody's talking about it. It's a pretty darn big storyline.
You know what's interesting? And again, we talked about and I won't say this in name because we talked about avoiding this for the majority of this part of the podcast. But the situation we have going on in the world right now might just give everything a reset. And you might be able to just come back and, sometimes and September 11th was his own thing. But after that, you just could be whoever you want it to be because of what had happened. So, who knows if this kid just rewrites himself and just kind of just says, hey, and it's a cheap gimmick, but kind of just says, hey, this happened and now I'm a different dude.
The show was called Greed by Mixed Molly Whoppery. Greed, Colby versus Dana in the UFC, and it's 15 minutes and 29 seconds long. And once you're done this podcast, listen to it the full entirety and then go watch that. I thought it was really interesting.
All right, let's move on to 185 pounds. Israel Adesanya is your champion. He just came off a very lackluster performance that he's getting, widely criticized for. On the cusp, I had Costa, I had Cannonier, I had Till, Shabazian. Best fight that is made or to make, Adesanya and Costa. Whitaker and Till is also a fight that's actually the Costa-Adesanya fight, although it seems very imminent, is not presently booked, and the Whitaker-Till fight is. So, and the biggest storyline is, can Stylebender clean out the division? How many fights are there from at 185, and is John Jones next?
Yeah, it's weird that for the fights coming up, you didn't mention Chris Weidman and Jack Hermanson or Jacare Souza and Uriah Hall. Oh, boy. Edmund Shabazian's taking on a tough out in Derek Brunson. There are a lot of good fights. I mean, Christoph Jotko, Eric Anders, Marvin Vittori, Darren Stewart, Zach Cummins, El Dierte, Andrew Sanchez, Carl Roberson, Mahmoud Muradov. Like, this division's popping right now. And it's one of those ones that, it's a little light, but you put a few wins together, like Adolfo Vieira, And there you go. You're just moving up the ranks. And he's one of those guys that I really think is underappreciated. I mean, you saw him, like, if that fight last weekend or the weekend before went any further, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, like if it passed the first round and he didn't get the submission win, I bet you the doctors would have stopped the fight because his eye was blown right up. So, you know, on the cusp, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Costa's probably your next title challenger. Jared Cannonier's right up there. Darren Till, big fight booked. Edmund Shabazian, like you said, and I had mentioned he's got a big fight on the go. But, yeah, 185's at a weird spot just where that last fight between Adesanya and Romero was so lackluster. Like, what do you do from here? Is it Costa automatically? Because that guy's thick.
Yeah, he was. And, you know, so it's interesting. I think, and the UFC probably does this, it's just something that, you know, one of those things where as a fan or media, you realize something and you're like, oh, yeah, that's what they're doing. I like it when you look at a division, you go, okay, this division is using the spring to set up the fall. And then maybe a different division is using the fall to set up next spring, right? Like right now, 155 has the fight, right? They have Nurmagomedov, they have Ferguson, right? So then after that fight happens, they'll use the fall to get ready for next spring. And now 85 is using the spring. Now, by the time all these fights play themselves out, the spring and summer, November, October timeframe, then we can get Israel Adesanya back in there and know clearly who, if Costa hasn't, you know, got back in shape and he isn't ready, then we'll know, okay, is Darren, how good did Darren Till look against Robert Whittaker? How good did, you know, you're probably not going to get a Shabazian or a Weidman jumping into a title shot. But I mean, if Weidman goes and knocks out Jack Hermanson, I don't think it gets him a shot at Adesanya, but it gets him, let me just say this while you're shaking your head, it gets him the Yoel Romero shot. The unlikely but has the right tools kind of a shot.
But wouldn't Jared Cannonier even be ahead of that?
He should be, right? But he's got no fight lined up to you know, he could just sit on the shelf. He's kind of in that Aljamain Sterling spot where I've already proven as much as I need to prove. And hopefully if the chips fall a certain way, it leaves me as the last man standing. He's got that going for him. So, yeah, I think the spring's going to tell us a lot about the fall.
So what happens if, and this is a bad hypothetical, and I know you don't want to get into it, but let's say the season stops Sunday.
All right.
We get the fights out of the way on Saturday, Sunday, and we're off for 4 months. That jumps us into the end of the summer. Okay, so we're like, what, end of July. You get everybody's healed up. Nobody got sick. Everybody's still around. Who does Israel Adesanya fight? Or do you keep him out even longer?
If nothing changed after Sunday, I would have him fight Paulo Costa with the assumption that Paulo Costa would be ready.
Yeah, I think that's the right move. I like your answer. You didn't go outside of the box, though.
No, not today. All right, so let's move on to 205 pounds light heavyweight. The champion is Johnny Bones Jones. On the cusp, again, I stuck with fighters who are have not yet competed for titles. So Jan Blachowicz, Rakic, Walker, Cutelaba, and Jimmy Crute. Best fight to make would be Jones versus Reyes 2 or Jones versus Blachowicz. And the biggest storyline, obviously, is who's next for John Jones. And is it Reyes? Is it Blachowicz? Is it Stipe Miocic? We'll get to that here in a second. What are your thoughts on 205 pounds?
Great division. Some movers and shakers. Guys like you had mentioned. What about Ryan Spann? What about Magomed Ankalaev and Ion Cutelaba? What about Johnny Walker and Nikita Krylov? There's a lot of question marks, but every now and again we're getting to see like an influx of younger talent. Alonzo Menifield's fighting Devin Clark. That's an exciting one. And then let me throw a wrinkle into that plan. Yuri Prohaska, the Ryzen champ. He's going to be fighting the UFC hopefully in 2020. And he really throws a wrench into it because I think he's the type of guy that could fight, you know, anybody in the top 15. And there's a chance he wins that fight. So automatically you're inserting a possible contender right there. It's an exciting division. It's just a shame that we don't know where John Jones is at. Is it light heavyweight? Is it heavyweight? What do you do? And I think you having that in biggest storyline is definitely a good spot to have because biggest storyline is definitely not who's going to win, Shogun or Little Nog. Well, the third fight's going to decide it.
Would you use Joel Romero as a gatekeeper at 85, or would you move him up 205?
I thought he was supposed to move up to 205 before. He played that little game there last week where he weighed in last. And unlike Kevin Lee, where it sucked, it was all right for Yoel Romero. But he's a guy that, like, you're 42, your title aspirations are pretty well done at 185. Even though you had a close fight, but it sucked. So move up to 205, do the Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold, and hopefully it works out for you.
There's some fights I'm interested in. This Thiago Santos thing, I can't shake. I mean, he was on a nice run, and he had a good fight with Jones. Some people thought he won it. What we're going to get from this guy moving forward is very interesting to me. Him and Anthony Smith a little bit. I mean, listen, he's 36, so whatever's going to happen needs to happen. But, you know, him, Romero, Smith, Reyes, Corey Anderson, Ozdemir, that's not a bad division.
The thing that doesn't make sense to me is Anthony Smith went on a run. I don't care who he beat. He clobbered Volkan Ozdemir, and he gets a title shot. He fights 5 rounds against John Jones, didn't fight well. And then he goes to Sweden and retires Alexander Gustafsson. And then he hurts his hand, and now he has to fight Glover Teixeira. Glover Teixeira in 2020, which it's just weird. Like, what happens if Anthony Smith wins that fight? You're not further ahead than you were by beating Gustafsson. You're probably behind. Like, it's weird.
Right, like if he goes the distance with him. If he goes the distance with Glover.
I don't care.
Like,
he could knock his head off his shoulders, and
I'm
he's
saying,
still behind.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I think for me, I just don't think they had the next guy to book him against. They didn't know what to do with Blachowicz. They didn't know what to do with Santos was hurt. Reyes was fighting Jones. So all the guys above him, they hadn't quite figured out what to do with yet.
So it's probably Reyes Santos maybe, or the winner of Teixeira and Smith fights Reyes.
Well, Smith is in that weird spot where you don't want him to fight Jones again. And if you put him in there against anybody that hasn't fought Jones, he might beat him.
Yeah.
So it's like you got to kind of hold him off a little bit. All right, let's move on to heavyweight. Your champion is Stipe Miocic. On the cusp, I had Jerzy Rozenstruik, Cyril Gane, and Greg Hardy. Best fight to make is looking like, based on the cryptic tweets of Daniel Cormier, DC versus Stipe 3. The ones that are booked are Rozenstruik versus Ngannou, Overeem versus Harris, Blades versus Volkov. This is actually a really busy division. I'm not super high on it, but the more that I researched, I was like, man, these guys got a lot going on. And they're very similar, I think, to 185 pounds, where a lot of things are going to move around in the next couple of months that could set up whatever the fight's going to be after whatever's up next for Stipe, which seems to be DC. The biggest storyline, again, like I just said, with all the fights that are scheduled, who will emerge to challenge Stipe? What's your thought on heavyweight?
Francis Cyril who? Is it Gane? Is it Gane? Or
I think it's Gane, but I listen. I froze.
Cyril Gane.
Right.
Cyril Gane. And I love Cyril Gane. I love him so much because where did he start out and just absolutely destroy? Was with TKO in Quebec. I love the fact that you have him there. And I actually, love's not the right word, but I agree with having Greg Hardy there. Because win or lose, that guy draws eyeballs. And if he puts even a couple of wins together, it's probably pretty easy to promote a Greg Hardy title shot on ESPN. Is it not? I mean, people flock to that guy for better or for worse. Best fight to make, DC Stipe 3, most likely going to happen. Maybe a dark horse here. The Blagoy Ivanov fight against Augusto Sakai. If Augusto Sakai can win that fight, again, now he's up there with the Volkovs of the world, and you kind of pass the Shamil Durakimovs, and that's kind of how weak this division is, that you can just name a couple of fighters, and hopefully you know what I'm talking about. If not, it's getting kind of weird. But I think Augusto Sakai with a win there has a good shot at moving forward. It is a weird division because you got a lot of older guys that have had a lot of fights in the UFC, and you got some young guys that are really starting to flourish.
Yeah, and then I'm mentioning now, obviously the Oleinik Verdum fight, which might be a good fight, but they're obviously both past their prime. So what happens if one of them looks good? Who's next for them? So there's a lot happening in this division, a lot of things, a lot of moving pieces. All right, so let's move on to our second sparring sessions. Normally we don't do 2 sparring sessions, but this is a unique podcast that we're doing this week. So the second sparring sessions is Craig. Does Miocic owe, keyword here being owe, Daniel Cormier, a third fight.
Why would he owe him a third fight?
Because they split 1-1.
He hurt Stipe's eyeball. You don't owe me anything if you hurt my eyeball.
That's fair.
I get it that they're split 1-1, but like you're getting close to the end of your career. Injuries are starting to pile up. They're probably starting to pile up on both sides. Stipe his wife just had a kid in the last year and a bit. DC has a family and he's got a broadcasting gig. Do we need to beat the hell out of each other just to see who's going to win the third one? Or do we live our lives knowing, hey, I could have won. I could have beat him. I don't think you really owe anybody anything at this point. I mean, you've got the Modelo money. You're still a firefighter. You don't owe anybody anything.
Well, I'm with you. I do think that DC could have avoided Stipe and chose not to. Although it would have really been a mark against his legacy in terms of the fact that Stipe was the most decorated heavyweight champion ever, whatever that means. And DC gave him the fight. For me, I think that it gets really weird because how much leeway are we going to give DC here? I mean, if the expectation is he wants the third fight so they can retire a champion, well, now you're screwing the whole division over. So if you're the UFC, why would I want you to retire as a champion, walk away with the belt? To me, you would have to do at least one more fight if I was the UFC. Like, I mean, I'm talking about a big fight. You'd have to, if I give you the third the third Stipe fight, you're giving me John Jones at heavyweight. That's going to happen. So if I'm the UFC. So I don't know, man. Like, I'm confused as to what we would be doing this for other than just to be a huge thank you to DC. That's what I mean, I get everybody likes DC. I get he's great for the sport. But I don't know, like you said, I don't know that the ass whipping that these two guys are going to put on each other is going to be worth what we get out of it, which would be either Stipe retains the title, which he just won. He's got the title now, or DC rides off in the sunset. Is either one of them worth what all we have to go through to get to it? And is it a big enough draw to make it worth it? I don't know. That's the question.
It's a good question. I don't know. It's a weird situation. I know what they were thinking, like maybe this summer, but now that's in flux too. So maybe you get the perfect storm that, hey, we need a big main event. Let's make that happen if they're both healthy and all things remain equal. But if not, maybe DC retires and Stipe fights the winner of Ngannou and Rosenstrike.
I think a lot about what's going on right now is going to determine how this thing plays out with DC. Because one, time is just passing, number one. But number two, we may find ourselves in a situation where if we lose a lot of time and we lose a lot of cards, that the end of the year is just filled with stacked cards. And then maybe the UFC doesn't make up the money that they would have lost, but there isn't a need for a headliner because instead of having like random fight night cards, it's just like the end of the year ends with just pay-per-view after pay-per-view after pay-per-view, one a month that's just loaded. I don't think the UFC would do that, but there's a chance it could. And
Go ahead.
No, we've set a precedent for you interrupting me. Why stop now?
Okay, I love it. All right. You know what I'd like? If it was like 5 months straight, every single weekend where I had to shell out $64.99 for a friggin' pay-per-view. I'd love nothing more than to spend $300, $400, $500 on pay-per-views. Just throwing it at the UFC. Just burning money.
I hear you. You should talk to a friend of the show, Brendan Schaub. He knows where all the good streams are. All right, let's talk about women's strawweight. We just had a banger of a fight. Prisoners of the moment are saying it's the best fight ever. People that are more realistic saying it's probably the best women's championship fight. Zhang Wei Li is your champion. On the cusp, I have Tatiana Suarez, Nina Ansaroff, Marina Rodriguez, and Xian Zhan. Best fight to make would be the rematch of Zhang Wei Li and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. The book fights that I like are Claudia Gadelha versus Marina Rodriguez and Watterson versus Esparza. In terms of the biggest storyline, should we get Wiley versus Jan Jacek 2, or should we go another way with the champion?
Yeah, I like everything that's there. I don't want to see a rematch between Zhang Weili and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I think, one happened. It was a good fight. Yeah, it was a split decision, but I don't think it was too controversial that Zhang Weili kept her title. Okay, under the radar. I like on the cusp too, because Tatiana Suarez, big what if. When does she come back from injury? Nina Ansaroff, pregnancy, so she's going to be off for a while. Marina Rodriguez, but I don't think that she's like a star in the making. I really don't. She doesn't have like a super exciting, flashy style. And Yan Xiaonan is definitely somebody that is on the cusp. Where's Brianna Van Buren? Brianna, where have you been? You beat Lavia Renata Souza. Where are you now? I said this with the old Fight Night picks. I said the winner of Rana Marcos and Amanda Hebus, hopefully they fight Brianna Van Buren. But Brianna, get back in the cage. You're very exciting. People want to see you. And I think if Brianna Van Buren can string together some wins, boom, right up there at the top of 115. And I think she's great on the mic. She puts on interesting performances. And she's only had one fight since she came in against Souza, and it was last summer. I mean, right now she's at a point where she had all the steam coming in from Invicta, and then she beat Souza and she looked awesome, and now it's kind of gone. Like, it really is. I'm not pumping my tires, but who's talking about her? Where's she been? I want to see her. Not that I think of her all the time, but when I think of this division, I think, where's Brianna Van Buren?
All right, let's move on to 125 pounds, women's flyweight. Your champ is Valentina Shevchenko. On the cusp, we have Macy Barber, Montana De La Rosa, Viviana Rojo. I guess you could put Roxanne Modafferi in there because she beat Barber. She's a little bit older, but all right, best fight that is made or to make. Shevchenko will be fighting Joanne Calderwood next, and Maya will be fighting Arrojo. Biggest storyline here is anyone near Shevchenko, and how far away is Macy Barber?
Okay, how far away is Macy Barber? What do you think? Because I think that's the biggest storyline that also affects on the cusp, that affects the whole division. Like, is Macy Barber the end-all, be-all solution at 125? Or do we just keep throwing challengers at Valentina Shevchenko until she gets bored and fights Amanda Nunes again?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think she's 3 fights away. I think, and depending on with the injury, I have no sort of updates on the injury. Maybe you do. I don't know how long it's going to sideline her. I don't know anything like that. So it could be a situation where she's a different fighter. It could be a situation where she's not. So for me, I would say if she came out of that fight uninjured in terms of her ability to train and do what she used to be able to do, I would say 3 fights away, maybe 2, depending on the opponent.
I have another question for you regarding Valentina Shevchenko, and I'm glad that, we get into flyweight. So Zhang Weili has 1 title defense, and she beat Jessica Andrade to get the title. People are saying, should Zhang Weili fight Valentina Shevchenko? I think it's ridiculous. What do you think?
I think that it's very dangerous to get into the business of saying that someone is so dominant based on who they've beaten that they then should jump weight classes. And what I mean by who they've beaten, in terms of, like, you got to go on a run for you to jump weight classes. You don't have to just say, all right, I beat Joanna. Joanna is the perceived best lighter weight women's MMA fighter in the world. That's the only test I have to pass. I passed it, so now I get to – it's like saying you're a freshman in high school and you passed the senior final and you should just go to college. I don't know that I agree with that. I can understand that the case is made for that, but I think you got to spend all 4 years in high school and go through everything. Just passing the senior biology final doesn't mean you should be going to college as a biology major. That's the way I look at it. I think she should have to fight people that, even though we think that that are going to be hard to promote and that we think she should be able to beat. Listen, Doug Rose is still in that division, and I don't know where her head's at these days. But when she was, the old Roddy Piper saying is when she's well, she's hell. And when she's on it, man, she's ready to go. So let's see how she plays out. Let's see where how her head gets together. And if she's ready, that's definitely a challenge worth making. I think we should wait a long time on the Shevchenko stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking in terms of the, biology to get into college, because up here, if you want to get out of high school, what they do is they have a line, and it's about 300 deep of just metal poles. And you go out there and you got to put your tongue on the metal pole. And the last one that can't get their tongue off the metal pole doesn't get a degree and you're held back here. Everybody else gets to move on to college. That's how it works up here in Canada. Then we just retreat back into our igloos, drink our maple syrup, and continue on with life. Now, to get back to Zhang Wei Li and Valentina Shevchenko, why? Why are you talking about that? You have a superstar at 115, which is a relatively dynamic division. Then you have 125, which isn't that dynamic, and everybody's talking about that one person. Listen, if you want to continue to market Valentina Shevchenko and you want to bump her up, maybe have her fight Zhang Wei Li. But to me, it's at the expense of two divisions. Just give her another fight. Whoever wins the Maya fight that you brought up, maybe that's who challenges next. I don't know, but to me, I would not move Zhang Wei Li up a division just for the sake of having a champ fight.
Yeah, I'm with you, and it's trying to fix the Shevchenko problem. You know, the way fights go is you don't fix the problem that a champion in one division has with a champion of another. And I get that this whole champ thing and the whole super fight thing, and like, okay, maybe we can have these two fight, and then we can raise both their profiles with a huge fight. I understand that, but the way that you fix one division is by having someone move up, right? So, you know, Tatiana Suarez, Claudia Gadelha, these are the people that move up. I'm not saying those people specifically. I'm saying you're a third, fourth, fifth, sixth ranked person in one division that's already fought for that division's belt, goes to chase a belt in another division. You don't take the champ and go try and make it happen. I know that they think they're trying to make a more compelling fight. I know they're trying to, again, raise both ladies' profiles, but that's to me, that's not the way you do it.
No.
All right, let's move on to 135 pounds in the women's division. At bantamweight, the champ is Amanda, the Lioness Nunes. On the cusp, I have Irene Aldana, Ketlin Vieira, and Aspen Ladd. The fights to be made in this division, nothing really jumped out at me as being like a spectacular fight because Nunes is booked, but she's booked at 145 pounds. So if you want to talk about the Ketlin Vieira Mariam Renault fight, okay, I'll have that conversation with you. But other than that, there's not a lot going on in this division. What are your thoughts in this division? Is it sort of just laying in wait till Amanda gets back? Is there some people that can, in the words of our friend of the show, Chael Sonnen, go into business for themselves? Like, what do we have here? Oh, and real quick, the biggest storyline is obviously who can get close to the Lioness.
Yeah, exactly. I like who you have in terms of like possible contenders on the cusp. I think Aspen Ladd's right there. The fight against Jermaine Durand definitely took the wind out of her sails a bit, but where it was slightly controversial, you can still sell it pretty easily. What's next with Holly Holm? She beat Raquel Pennington, so really she was most deserving of a shot at 145, but that's not happening. So what's the deal with Holly Holm? What's the deal with Raquel Pennington? Sarah McMahon beat the hell out of Lena Landsberg in her last fight, so automatically she comes off a big layoff and looks great. Macy Chiason's another one. She beat Shanna Young, who came in on like 2 days' notice, and beat her quite badly after getting rocked early. But Macy Chiason is one of those ones that you can't deny. She's looked great at 35 with few exceptions. Lots of power. Fortis MMA, trains with Bia Malecki, who's fighting this weekend against Veronica Macedo, which if you saw the pictures today, it's like if Slender Man fought somebody much smaller than Slender Man. I don't know. They're very not well matched. But yeah, it's a weird division. I'm going off of Fight Matrix. They only have 21 fighters listed in terms of fighters who have fought in the UFC. And at the bottom, you've got Talita Bernardo coming off a loss, Tanya Evinger, Nico Montano, Sajara Eubanks, all of them losses, which, hey, you're going to get lost in a division. But it's just to say it's a weird division right now. And I like how you capped it with who's next for Amanda Nunes. Really, I mean, what do we have? Like you said, Betch Kohei is fighting Pani Kianzad. Does the winner of that fight get a title shot? No. Julia Vila is fighting Carol Rosa. Ketlin Vieira Renault. Like, I don't know who's going to get a title shot next.
Well, let's move on and talk about who's next for Amanda Nunes at women's featherweight. She is the champ there as well. On the cusp is Felicia Spencer. Best fight to make that is made is Nunes versus Spencer. And the biggest storyline in this division, honestly, is what's the point? Why are we doing this? Are we doing this as a vehicle to just kind of wait it out until at some point, we've talked about this on shows in the past. of, is this division just the equivalent of the WNBA, where it's just being kept around for the purposes of it being there for if someone were to emerge. I mean, it got started ostensibly for Cyborg Santos, and here we are. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on this division, and where do we go from here?
To me, it should have been champ Amanda Nunes, on the cusp Felicia Spencer, under the radar Felicia Spencer. Best fight made or to make. You know where I'm going. Amanda Nunes, Felicia Spencer, biggest storyline, Felicia Spencer. I don't know what the point is. I don't know. We're feeding a fed horse because we talked about it, but I really don't know. Apart from Felicia Spencer and Megan Anderson, what else you got? Norma Dumont and Zara Farron? Who else is there? I don't know. You had a whole season revolving around the women's featherweights on The Ultimate Fighter. You have featherweights in Invicta. You have featherweights elsewhere in the world, but you don't seem to want to invest much time and energy into featherweight. I don't know what the point is, even if you're just holding on to Anderson and Spencer for the purpose of matching them back up with Nunes and keeping them away from Bellator. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I mean, I guess what you could do is play the waiting game and kind of put them out there. You know, let the Spencer fight go, see what happens. Obviously, if Spencer wins, you can rebook her with Anderson. So, I mean, you can keep it moving, but you can't really it's not flourishing. You know, to me, it's like you have a garden, you planted the seed, you just keep watering it. You haven't seen anything yet, but you just keep watering it in the hope someday it's going to be something. All right, Craig, it's time to end the show, but start the conversation. Craig, I started this week with Imagine by John Lennon for a couple of reasons, and I'll just leave it at this. The coronavirus doesn't give a shit what country you live in. So if we're going to solve this problem, we have to solve it together. Let's start the conversation this week with what we started the show with and talk about keeping sports in their proper perspective. We have so much going on this week. How do we have a balance of not getting freaked out, but also being vigilant? What are your thoughts on sports place right now? Should there be a way they could figure out to show us some sports as a little bit of a distraction so that every channel isn't the coronavirus? Or do you think that, hey, we got an issue, we step away for a little bit?
Yeah, I really think ESPN, the Ocho, should probably show the 2012 professional bowling finals. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know where I'm going with this. Who do you think you are? I am. Damn it right. Nobody's ever said damn it right before, but my boy Pete Weber did. You got to get creative at this point. Like, I watched a clip of ESPN showing bowling today, so that's why I went with that. But yeah, it's weird. What do you fill your programming time with? For me, you've got old stuff. You could show old Stanley Cups. You could show old World Series games. You could show every single Astros game that you can where they're banging trash cans. You could show any UFC card that you want. You could go back and show it when Keith Hackney was punching Joe Son in the dick. You could show who was the Canadian guy? It wasn't Howard Hughes. What was his name? The one season, the fourth Ultimate Fighter. He was Canadian.
Oh,
from Niagara Falls. You're typing it in. I'm going to do it, but I'm representing Canada, and I'm from Niagara Falls, and we've got a saying around my part. If you're coming on, come on, which is something I've never heard a Canadian say ever. But he won the fourth Ultimate Fighter, which was unfortunate because didn't Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie both pull out?
Yes. I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name.
Exactly. Canadian, I can't think of it, so it's sad. But yeah, I mean, MLB 20 came out today for PlayStation. You could take the James Lynch approach and you could play Sega Genesis NHL 94, which is a great game. But to answer the question, I don't have a great solution. I think it's kind of like being a football fan in the middle of February. That's kind of where you're at without the XFL or college football. It's like they talk about the draft, they talk about the combine, they talk about free agency, but eventually it's pretty boring being a football fan at that time of the year. And that's where they're at right now with every single sport. So alternative programming, maybe you come up with some new shows. Maybe John Franklin and Craig Allen get a piece of that ESPN pie. I don't know.
Yeah, here's the thing. And again, I said I wasn't going to do this, and I'm really not going to do this. But for me, I think that if you are a fan of sports, there may be some good things that come out of this in the sense that there's going to be a lot that may happen in a very short period of time. There may be some things that you're going to see you've never seen before. Could be Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson fighting at the UFC Apex in front of no one is very interesting to me. So, the NBA having their season run into August is very interesting to me. They've talked about doing that anyway. There's talk of all these different, leagues that are trying stuff out. They may be forced to try things out based on this. This would be my advice because this is what I'm going to do. Well, I won't say this is my advice. I'll say this is what I'm going to do. Everything that I've heard about the coronavirus says that it doesn't affect people as much who are young and healthy. So here would be my advice. You can be a shut-in, and you can just sit in your house and wonder what the hell they're going to put on TV now that all the sports are gone. Or you can get out of your house, still be self-quarantined, and go to a park. Spend some time with your kids. Live a healthy lifestyle. Make sure when you're going grocery shopping, shop for stuff that people don't typically buy, which is healthy food. Cook healthy for yourself. I would say just do what you can to keep yourself healthy and socially distanced. And then when sports come back, enjoy them. And then hope that when sports come back, that'll be a sign for you that things are getting better. And that would be my advice. Keep sports in their proper perspective. They are important. But, don't call Dana White a pussy because he won't have two guys fight, because you had to cancel your tickets to London to watch Leon Edwards and Tyron Woodley. Like, let this thing play itself out and be vigilant and keep yourself washed and appropriately distanced from people and just do your best to live a healthy lifestyle. And I think that, again, I have no affiliation to anyone that is not that has anything to do with medicine this is not my advice from a medical perspective. This is the thing that I keep hearing over and over again is make sure you wash your hands and you should be healthy. And if you're healthy, you're have a higher chance of things being all right. So then do that. Go live a healthy lifestyle. Enjoy,
I'm gonna ruin it right now. The quotable was keep yourself washed. Keep that in mind. John Franklin told you to keep yourself washed.
Okay, guys, there you have it. The 20th episode of Early Stoppage is in the books. Be sure and comment, subscribe, and like us on YouTube. Be sure to also listen to all the other content on Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, including Not Safe for Work Podcast with Kyle Steele and Fred Curry, Between the Links, hosted by Mike Heck, starring an all-star cast of writers from around MMA, including Keith Schillen, Craig Allen, Davidson Baker, Loudmouth Recap Show with Keith Schillen and myself, the Breakdown Show with Max and Marcel, MMA Yesterday with Keith Schillen and Kyle Steele. This would be a great time to start banging out MMA Yesterdays. The Kyle Steele Show, the MMA Takeover with Keith Schillen, Off the Cuff with Mike Heck. A lot going on the network, on the channel. As always, we'll have content. We'll figure out ways to bring you guys content. If the UFCs for the foreseeable future are canceled, you can bet your ass I will talk to Kyle and Keith about myself doing MMA Yesterdays as a way to keep me talking about MMA in the absence of upcoming fights. Craig can be followed at Craig Allen FMP. I can be followed at SM Cornerman. The fight has been stopped. We'll see you next week. Craig, say something witty.
Next week in MMA Yesterday, UFC 54, we're talking Chuck Liddell and Jeremy Horn, Randy Couture, Mike Van Arsdale, Diego Sanchez, Brian Gassaway. Not Brian Caraway, Brian Gassaway. Get ready for it. Frank Trigg, GSP. It was a great card, and that's what the guys are going to be talking about. So get ready. Find yourself a couch or a stationary bike. Go outside like you were told. Make sure you keep yourself washed and tune in to MMA Yesterday.
And lastly, so you guys don't think that we let anything get by us here on Early Stoppage, Harold Howard was the gentleman's name. He lost UFC 3. He did not win UFC 4. He lost to Steve Jenna. Harold Howard.
If you're coming on, come on.
All right, guys. See you next week. Peace.